This video has been in the making since long time. Hey guys, it's Sagar, and in this video I'm going to compare the cameras on the Realme 10 Pro Plus with the ones on the iPhone 14 Pro. Yes, I know there is a huge price gap between these phones. In fact, you can buy 5 Realme 10 Pro Plus phones in the price of one iPhone 14 Pro. This video is just an experiment to see if the images from the iPhone 14 Pro are 5 times better than the ones from the Realme 10 Pro Plus. Every year, I also like to see how far the mid-budget smartphones have come compared to the flagship phones in terms of their cameras. So that is what this video is about. Realme 10 Pro Plus gets 3 cameras on its back. The main 108 megapixel sensor, a secondary 8 megapixel sensor with 16mm ultra-wide angle lens, and finally a 2 megapixel sensor with a macro lens. iPhone 14 Pro finally upgrades its primary camera to a 48 megapixel sensor. Then there is a 12 megapixel sensor with an ultra-wide angle lens, and finally another 12 megapixel sensor with a 3x optical zoom lens. At the front, Realme gets a 16 megapixel sensor with f2.5 aperture, and the iPhone comes with a 12 megapixel sensor with f1.9 aperture. If I'm being honest, leaving the main cameras aside, other 2 cameras on the Realme 10 Pro Plus basically have no chance of competing with the ones on the iPhone 14 Pro. And main camera is the one most of the people end up using majority of the time anyways, so in this video, we will just compare the image and video samples from their main cameras. With that, let us head to the image samples, starting with the daytime shots from both these phones. In bright daytime, most cameras take really good images, and these two are no different. There are however differences between the images from these two cameras. By the way, these are 12 megapixel pinned images from both the phones. They can take high resolution shots as well, and we will look at them a bit later on in the video. By this point, I am sure most of you might have noticed the difference in the color and contrast in these images. iPhone 14 Pro captures more contrast, which makes the shadows in its images appear darker in comparison, whereas the Realme 10 Pro Plus tends to lift up the shadows and capture overall brighter looking images. This sometimes also makes its images look more lively. Although we are very early in this comparison, I uncovered a major flaw in the Realme 10 Pro Plus's images. In most of these outdoor daytime shots, it makes the colors appear a lot cooler. In other terms, it is not showing proper white balance and color temperature in its images. It's got to a point where the iPhone's images start looking a bit yellowish in comparison, but that is how the scene actually looked when I took these images. I took these images on a warm sunny day, and you can actually see that warmth in iPhone's images, whereas that warmth is not visible in any of the shots from the Realme 10 Pro Plus. Some people might like the cooler colors from the Realme, but you guys should know that those were not the actual colors of the scene. This issue is in almost all of the images from the Realme 10 Pro Plus, but in some of the shots it is very apparent, while in others it goes unnoticed to some extent. When I zoom in on these images, we still see a ton of details in them. iPhone 14 Pro's images however seem to have a bit more details, while the Realme 10 Pro Plus seem to have applied a bit more sharpening to its shots. That also makes the noise in its images a bit more apparent when we zoom in so far. Don't get me wrong, Realme's images are not over sharp, they are just a bit sharper than the iPhone's images, and I don't think there is anything wrong about it. Both the phones again have a slightly different way of capturing overall colors. The iPhone 14 Pro is having more saturation and contrast in its images than what you would see with your own eyes, while the Realme 10 Pro Plus has surprised me with its natural looking colors. However, iPhone 14 Pro is very consistent with its color palette, while the Realme 10 Pro Plus is not. Yes, iPhone is capturing saturated colors which are not the most accurate, but Realme 10 Pro Plus sometimes just takes away all the colors from its images, like in this shot. It made the entire shot look lifeless, while the iPhone 14 Pro this time shows slightly more accurate colors out of the two. All that being said, everyone perceives color in a different way. What looks good to me might not look the same to you and vice versa, and that is completely fine. Due to this fact, colors from which of these phones you like will completely depend on your personal preference. If you don't like the colors from the iPhone 14 Pro, you can turn on photographic styles and adjust the colors according to your liking. Or if you want slightly saturated looking colors from the Realme 10 Pro Plus, turn on the AI mode and all of your images will have a bit more punch to them in terms of colors. If you saw my iPhone 14 Pro's camera review, you must know that I am not too happy with its HDR performance, but in these images, it seems to be doing a much better job than the Realme 10 Pro Plus. In 85 to 90% of its images, Realme does well with the dynamic range. But as I mentioned before, it tries to lift up the shadows, which means in some of the shots like this one, the brighter parts of the scene are overexposed or just blown out. This doesn't happen every time, and when it does, you can tap on either the brighter or darker parts of the scene and adjust the exposure slider manually until the shot looks more balanced. In few of the shots, in the hopes of bringing up the shadows, images from Realme end up looking over-processed. Yes, the colors are looking bright and saturated, and there is enough light in every part of Realme's image, but somehow your eyes and brain knows that this is never how a scene looks in real life. Realme needs to cut down the HDR processing and let there be some contrast in these images, otherwise they look very flat. iPhone 14 Pro's images are looking much better in comparison. In these shots, iPhone again seems to have a greenish yellow tint, but it handles the darker and brighter areas much better. Realme 10 Pro Plus had the HDR mode set to auto, and I think it failed to turn it on for this shot, resulting in a much darker looking image. Both the phones are fairly quick at setting the focus when you want to capture close-up shots, but they both have a few problems of their own. Because the image sensor is so big and the aperture is wide, the minimum focusing distance on the iPhone 14 Pro is way worse than the main camera on the Realme 10 Pro Plus. You will have to be very far away from your subject if you want it to be in focus on the iPhone. As a workaround for that, you can hit the 2x button on the viewfinder and the phone will now let you take good looking close-up shots. Realme 10 Pro Plus has a different issue. Despite of having a 108 megapixel sensor, its minimum focusing distance is really good and it will let you get very close to your subject for taking close-up shots. But very often its main camera will just fail to set the focus on the subject. This happened to me for a few shots, and no matter how much I move the phone or try to recompose the shot, it just won't set the focus. So both the phones have few problems while taking close-up shots, but when they end up setting the focus properly, these shots look really good from both of them. Now if you want to get even closer to your subject, both the phones will let you take macro shots. Now I said at the beginning that I won't be talking about other cameras on these phones, but since the iPhone 14 Pro lets you take macro shots with the wide lens, I thought I should include a few samples of that as well. I won't be talking too much about these images, so you can look at them and decide for yourself which one took better macro shots. I think it's time we look at the 108 megapixel shots from the Realme's main sensor and compare them with the 48 megapixel ones from the iPhone 14 Pro. Let's be honest, other than the difference in the contrast and both capturing different colors, we honestly can't see major difference in the amount of details in these images from so far. But once you zoom in 5 to 6 times, we can clearly see the 108 megapixel images having slightly more details. If you look closer, you will also notice that it ends up capturing more noise as well. The story remains the same in most of the high resolution shots. Realme's images have more details, but you will have to zoom in a lot to notice these differences. In this shot, we see Realme has shown less noise and there is basically no noise in the iPhone's shot. So when you are capturing a high resolution shot with either of these phones, just make sure to do that when there is plenty of light around. Realme captures more details in these images, but iPhone does a better job with the colors and dynamic range. It will show a ton of details in the shadowed parts while not blowing up the bright areas. Realme can manage to do only one of this in the 108 megapixel mode. Yes, high resolution shots on the Realme do capture more details, but you will have to zoom in 6 to 700% and compare both these images side by side to see any noticeable difference in their detail levels. I don't think anyone does this on their phone, and on top of that, these images are 7 to 8 times larger in terms of file size than the pixel bin ones, which means they will eat up your phone's internal storage in no time. You can definitely switch to the high resolution mode when you're trying to capture some landscape or architecture, because those are the situations when you would want to get as many details as possible into your shot. But for most of your everyday shots, you should stick to the default pixel bin mode on both these phones. Coming to the portrait shots, both seem to be doing a good job with the edge detection for these images. Realme was not this good when it first came out, but with each software update it kept on getting better. The subject in these images and their faces are much detailed in the portrait shots on the iPhone 14 Pro, while they look very soft in the ones from the Realme 10 Pro Plus. iPhone's portraits also show very natural skin tones and overall pleasing looking colors, whereas Realme's images have a somewhat processed look to them. If you have a bright scene behind your subject, then portraits on the Realme 10 Pro Plus will completely blow it away. It did well to keep the subject properly exposed, but in the process, look how it messed up the background. It does this for all of the portrait shots, and in this one, you can clearly see the face being in sharp focus from the iPhone 14 Pro. Whenever you have a bright background behind your subject, be very aware if you have the Realme 10 Pro Plus. Now I took these portraits at a restaurant in the evening. The background was very busy and complex, and the lighting conditions were a bit harsh. iPhone handled these shots like you would expect any decent camera would, but the Realme 10 Pro Plus just overexposed the whites in these shots and barely managed to capture any details in their faces. That brings us to the images which I took in artificial and lower lighting conditions. Both these phones have big image sensor and wide aperture, and that allows them to capture such good looking images in lower light. We again see the iPhone capturing true to life colors. This is how warm the lights in this room were, whereas Realme 10 Pro Plus made it look much cooler, just like it did with the daytime shots. iPhone's main camera gets OIS and Realme's doesn't, which also makes the iPhone's images look slightly sharper. If I zoom in on these shots, you can clearly see iPhone's images having more details. The text on the books and the wooden board behind the books has so much more details in iPhone's shot. That being said, if you don't zoom in so much, Realme's images also look really good, and they are not too far behind the iPhone in these lighting conditions. When we are in even lower lighting conditions, both can take night mode shots, and both of them capture a lot more details with this mode turned on. OIS on the iPhone means it can take sharper images even as the light gets lower. I think we all are aware by now that night mode needs more time to capture images, and having OIS helps the sensor remain stable for that time, resulting in more detailed shots. Coming to the front-facing cameras, Realme 10 Pro Plus gets a 16 megapixel selfie camera and iPhone 14 Pro gets a 12 megapixel one. Despite of having a lower resolution sensor, iPhone's selfies seem to be sharper and a bit more detailed. The difference is little, but it also seems to be handling the skin tones and overall colors a bit better. You can of course see these things only when you look too deep into these selfies. Otherwise, from this far, I would say both the selfies look pretty much the same. Portrait selfies on the other hand look much sharper, natural and better from the iPhone 14 Pro. As you can probably tell, edge detection and dynamic range is also better in the portrait selfies from the iPhone. Here's a video from the front-facing camera of the Realme 10 Pro Plus and the iPhone 14 Pro. You can check out how both these phones are handling the overall colors of the scene, exposure and stabilization when I'm walking around with them. When it comes to videos, both these phones can shoot 4K videos with their main cameras. iPhone 14 Pro can shoot them at 60 FPS with all its cameras, while just the main camera on the Realme 10 Pro Plus can shoot 4K videos, that too at 30 FPS. These 4K videos get OIS and EIS on the iPhone 14 Pro, whereas there is no stabilization for 4K videos on the Realme 10 Pro Plus. That being said, if you hold your phone steady or have it set on a tripod, then the 4K videos from the Realme 10 Pro Plus look very good and detailed. To get stabilization on the 10 Pro Plus, you will have to switch to shooting 1080p videos at 30 FPS. These 1080p videos look very good and stable from Realme. But to get this, you have to give up on a lot of details that the 4K videos could have captured. Video-wise, Realme has a long way to go in order to compete with the iPhones. With that, we have seen over 120 image and video samples from both these phones combined. Realme has done really well with these shots. While its images are not as good as the ones from the iPhone 14 Pro, its performance in this comparison has been really commendable. If Realme could work a bit on getting the colors and white balance right, its images could have performed even better. For videos, it is difficult for even Android flagship phones to come close to the iPhones, so I don't think we should read too much into this. If you are okay with taking 1080p videos, Realme 10 Pro Plus does a very good job with it. All that being said, the main aim of this video was to find out if the iPhone 14 Pro's camera is 5 times better than the ones on the Realme 10 Pro Plus. And after looking at all these images, I can easily say that iPhone 14 Pro's camera is clearly better. But I honestly don't think that it is 5 times as good. Every year, we see mid-budget smartphones getting even closer to flagship phones in terms of cameras. Hopefully, Apple is keeping an eye on this and is working on creating a bigger differentiation in their cameras. So these were my thoughts about the main cameras on these phones. You guys saw these images too, so what do you guys think about their main cameras? Let me know in the comments. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for a lot more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.